Feeling stronger. Just like that guy in the thing. What is his name? Rocky? Who? Never heard of him. Anyway, we're on the Ask Brien radio show. Ask Brien, Brien. For those listeners who have not, and I'm going to call you out right now, ever listen to this show, we got a treat for you. We got a very good person here. He actually used to work with a guy some people may have heard of. His name is Jobs. I don't know. Steve Jobs. Yeah, he used to work with him, so he knows a little bit. I don't know if he'll be willing to tell us any of the stories, but hopefully he can. He's had a couple of successful companies in his career, a very, very successful business person, and his name is Alex Grossman. He'll be on the show very shortly. He owns a company, Simply Incorporated, GoSimply.com, and that's SYMPLY. See, everybody spells the names differently. Simply, SYMPLY. Ask Brien, BRIEN.com. Nobody here goes the regular route. Before we get to Alex, our radio, we are going to be launching the new site on Monday. Tomorrow, Friday, we have finalized everything, and we're going to be migrating everything over to the new site. And Ask Brien's site, for those who have not actually been on the site yet, not registered, we are a business platform. We offer the ability to ask and answer business questions. We have experts that'll ask and answer those questions. We also have videos for business training. We have ebooks for business training. We have blogs posted by experts, and experts are allowed to post their webinars, and so you can calendar them on your personal Google Calendar and load them on and be able to watch any webinar you want. So basically, anything you want to learn about business, and it's all free. So we're very excited to launch that. It's the Ask Brien site revised, and we've been building up for it for a while. We'll also be on the road, obviously, once that happens for the next week or so, and that's going to be very, very big. My co-host, Patty, is out at another event today, so she won't be here. So you'll be listening to 100% myself and 100% Mr. Fabulous, Alex Grossman. Alex, you there?
I am here, Brien Johnson. How are you today?
I am doing fine. And by the way, I hope everybody knows that I'm calling you Mr. Fabulous. So that's your nickname on the show. But you won't be the first Mr. Fabulous, because I think there was somebody else called that in the old school days, if people know his name, Mr. Fabulous. Anyway, so I've been speaking to you a couple of times. I've actually had conversations with you, and you have quite an amazing background. Let's first start out, and it's going to be a little bit after you were born, so we're going to skip that part. But your first job, you started out like gangbusters. I mean, in your 20s, you were very, very successful. How did that come about? What was that job, and how did you get the job? So first of all, what was the job?
Yeah, well, it's interesting, Brien, because the first job is always, as a kid, I had a paper route. That's where the first job starts. My parents also were in the diner business, if you want to call it that, and so I started working very, very young. But of course, like anybody else, you go to college, you get out. I want to change the world. My idea was I wanted to be an engineer, because the first thing engineers do is they invent things. They change the world. But my first real successful job wasn't in engineering. It was actually in sales. So how crazy is that?
Okay, so you went to college. You get a degree in engineering, right? Was your first
right.
Your first job was not in engineering?
Well, that's kind of interesting. My first job was actually in engineering. I went to work for a company that used to be around. They got bought by They actually got bought by HP, and they were called Compaq. And they had a division early on called DEC, or Digital Equipment Corporation. And it's kind of funny, because I went to work there right after college as an engineer, and they called me a component engineer. So my entire job was to take components that were no longer made and find replacements. So in this case, there was a light bulb. So I spent 6 weeks there trying to figure out initially what replacement light bulb would be for this one. The interesting thing about this, what really drove me into my later career, is I was, as an engineer, eating lunch with some of the sales and marketing team at this company, at Digital Equipment, and they said to me one day, would you like to sit in on a product meeting, because we are going to talk about what the next great product the company was going to actually develop was. And I looked at them kind of funny, being right out of college and having only worked there for 6 weeks. I said, wait, I'm an engineer. Engineers design products. We're the ones who determine what the world's going to be. And they said, no, you have to understand. Product marketing and salespeople determine where the market's going to go. All you do is build stuff for us.
Wow.
And, that light bulb went off in my head that day, and I said, you know what? You need to go back to school and learn more about product marketing and learn about the sales channel. And that's what I did. And so even though I'm trained as an electronic engineer, I'm a double ET, the real world and where I made it was actually in designing products and then being able to effectively take the products to market. So what I would call go-to-market development.
So you're telling me in one lunch they switched your mind?
They actually gave me something to think about. And it was really more about after that lunch, sitting in the meeting with them and looking at the process they had in determining what customers wanted to buy versus what we wanted to make. So as an engineer, we always have these ideas in our head that what we were going to do is we were going to come up with the latest, greatest thing, invent new technologies and somehow get people to use them. And, the old saying is that the best mousetrap in the world, the best one designed, is on the bottom shelf of some store because there's no marketing around it. No one's telling people how good it is. There's no salespeople selling it because the engineers spend all their money designing it and the other companies spend all the money marketing it. And so I learned that really quickly, and within 6 months of working there, I had already been taking night school classes, learning product marketing, doing what I needed to do, and really starting on a sales and product marketing career.
Now, when that light bulb went off and you discovered that, is that the light bulb you used to replace it on that first project?
That's pretty funny. That's pretty funny.
I'm a funny guy, some people say.
Yeah, no, I think it's actually a little bit of that. I realized that what I was doing, and this is not knocking engineers because, the engineers are required in here, but really people have little idea how new products and new things come to market and how it's been driven. And I know you mentioned one of my old bosses, Steve Jobs, and I think that's a perfect situation. If you looked at the way Apple first came into being with Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs, Steve Jobs was more of the marketing salesperson, but he was really the best product manager that I have ever met and that most people would ever meet. He understood product. He understood customers' needs. And Wozniak was an incredible engineer that if Steve said it needs to do this, Wozniak could figure out how to make that work. And I think most successful companies you find do that. There's this idea that when you go to develop a product or a service for market, you have to understand the market. And there's two philosophies in here. And the Steve philosophy, which I think is still the best there is that what you do is you go out and you ask the right questions to the market, you observe the market, you look at it, and you look at their needs and their latent needs. What does the market need? What do people need rather than what do they want? And it was always explained to me like this. The best example was if you gave a group of people a pen and you said to them, I need to design a better pen. What's the best pen? People would come back and they go, I want a fatter pen. Other people go, I want a thinner pen. Some people would say, make it heavier, make it lighter, make it longer, all these different changes. And people would look at that and go, most product people or most engineers would look at it and they'd go, well, 20 out of 50 people say the pen needs to be fatter. We're going to make it fatter. 30 out of 50 people say the pen needs to be heavier. Let's make it heavier. Well, the good product manager would say, what are you going to use the pen for? And this was the Steve Jobs moment. This is really the light bulb that went on in my head when I started studying Steve before, when I was out of school and really wanted to be a great product person and a great person selling these products. And he would say, what are you going to use the product for? And what are you going to use the pen for? And he invented the iPad because he said, the best pen you have is no pen. It's use your finger because you don't need the pen.
Well, wouldn't he invent it? Hold on.
Thinking is the key.
Wouldn't he invent a DocuSign then?
Yeah, there you go. And there's a lot of truth to that, right? No, it's just an example of exactly the way people look at it. And then, of course, it takes to get an idea out there, everybody has a latent need, not really a need. So to get that latent need out there, you have to get people to understand they can get rid of the pen and they can get away from it. Now, you look at kids today, how many kids go to school today and learn how to write? I mean, it's pretty sad, right? And a lot of them used to learn how to type, but most of them today have tablets. You look at the school districts, they're not issuing really computers. Some are issuing Chromebooks, but for the most part, it's tablets, because the new world is, I'm going to get away from the idea that I need pens and I need paper, and it's good and bad. But that's just an example of where it was, kind of leading to me my first real job where I made real money.
You're listening to KHTS 1220 and 98.1 FM. People love it when I say "and" for my New York accent. Anyway, we're back live with Alex Grossman. Now, a couple questions for you. I was going to bring up Steve Wozniak when you talked to me about, do you build the product first, or do you build, get the marketing demand? Because obviously, when Wozniak was, now he may have been working with Steve Jobs, but he was sitting there day after day for years building up that clunker called the Apple One, and
Right.
done okay, I guess. Now, Steve Jobs was probably the one that made it big, but the reality is, you talk about the clunkers that's sitting there and the engineers working on it. I mean, that's an engineer who worked on a product and it came to success. So that technically could be said to be both sides of the coin, both the product part and the engineering part.
Well, yeah, you need both. I mean, the bottom line is that let's back up a second and say, for every great change, every game changer we talk about, it's a combination of an invention or something that, a combination of parts that come together and make something new or something different. And usually it's a combination of parts that are put together in a different way. So Apple was not the first personal computer, but it was done in a different way. And it was really designed for the computer club. It was designed to have a lower cost personal computer instead of one of these big, clunky, extremely expensive, difficult to use things. Even early on, the Apple was a do-it-yourself, make the box out of wood, put the motherboard in, and go computer. And so the thinking on Wozniak's side was really, and I mean, I don't want to speak for Steve, he's a good guy, but the thinking on his side was that he wanted to be able to bring this low-cost, do-it-yourself computer to people. The thing on Steve Jobs' side is, hey, a lot of people feel the way that you do. There's a latent need out there to get something like this to a lot of people, not just the computer club in Santa Clara. And so the idea to get it out there and bring it wide is where you take a great idea or concept and you turn it into a product. So I would say that the way I look at it is engineers design components, product managers and product people, what I would call a product visionary, is the person who designs a product, a solution. So you need both pieces. You can't build a solution from nothing, but you can't take those individual components and figure out how they fit together to be a solution. Does that make sense to you?
It does, but you brought up something that I had never heard before, and I'm quite. And now I need to do the follow-up. I did not know. I thought that Steve Wozniak was the first one with the personal computer. I thought that they had mainframes and they had the other towers and all that other stuff, but that the actual personal computer, the first one, was by Wozniak. So if it wasn't Wozniak, who was it and when?
Well, and I don't want to write the history, or you can go to the Computer Museum in Northern California and get a good look at all the different ones. But the Apple was the first commercially acceptable personal computer. Let's put it that way. And there's people who will argue over who invented the first personal computer because, it depends on where the market was. I mean, if you go back years before that, people will say, well, there's room. I mean, for IBM said, there was never more than room for 6 computers in the world back when they then invented the ENIAC, right? And Bill Gates said that you'll never need more than 64K of RAM. So there's been a lot of these assumptions that were made. When the personal computers revolution first came out, it was a personal computer was going to be to people who could afford it. This was the rich elites and the geeks would have a personal computer, someone who had an interest in it. But the Apple idea was that every person should have a computer, and that not only the geeks had to have it, but every person could have it. And of course, this was something that went well beyond the Apple One, and went to the Apple II and the IIc, and of course the Mac. The Lisa before that, it was changing this entire idea. I mean, even if you look at where the Lisa and the Macintosh came from, coming out of Xerox Labs, and what happened, what happened with the mouse, and how that was a productivity tool, but that tool was more important to a consumer than it even was to a professional. So, a lot of this has changed. I mean, engineers design components that can be used in many different ways, and product people or product visionaries take those components and they put them as the solution to a problem. So, this has been one of the issues that people ask me all the time, and I've mentored a number of people in kind of go forward in smaller companies, and they say, I have this great idea. I want to build this, and this is revolutionary, and this is going to change. And I always ask them that really simple question, well, who's going to use it? And then I ask the second question, what problem does it solve? So, it's the mousetrap thing, right? You could build the best mousetrap in the world, but if the one on the shelf that kills a mouse or catches a mouse and costs, $1, and you're going to build one that does it more elegantly for $200, you have to ask yourself, first of all, who's going to buy it, who's going to use it, and what's wrong with the one that's already there? And, a lot of people would say to me, well, from an innovation standpoint, you always want to be constantly innovating. Well, I always say, well, you want to innovate on things that require innovation. If something doesn't require innovation, don't spend your time on it. Spend your time on things that require innovation. So I think that when you look at Apple was really all about, and everybody has an opinion on this, but to me, and Steve never talked to us about a lot of this, but Apple always had this idea of, let's figure out where this is going to go, see how big that audience is, then talk to the audiences around them and see what those needs are. And he couldn't imagine being early in that computer environment, that personal computer environment, and asking people, well, what do you want to make this a better personal computer? They would have zero frame of reference, right? Because they didn't have a personal computer. So it only came out of these two guys' heads, really. What is the best personal computer? I mean, Wozniak's idea always took that from the technology standpoint. I mean, he invented some incredible technology that was used into the Macs, for many, many years afterward, that came out of the Apple One. So the question you always have to ask yourself is, how do I take this technology and where do I use it, and when do I put it with other technology to make it great?
So let's go back over the mouse. You said the mouse. My understanding is the mouse was actually invented by Xerox. What was the purpose of the mouse prior to the Mac? What was the reason why they invented that? What product manager said we need mouse?
Well, again, what's a better way of getting things done? I mean, look at the way computers worked before the mouse. There were no graphics. Nothing was graphical, and this is kind of an interesting point here. Everything was done on essentially a command line. So if you wanted to represent something graphically, or you wanted to be able to utilize the screen more effectively, you had to be able to navigate around the screen. And the mouse became a way to navigate around the screen very simply and to be able to select things that were on the screen. Of course, right away, once this happened, people started applying this to a lot of different industries, but they applied it to things that were more graphically oriented. For instance, I'll give you for instance, one of my first jobs was in the publishing industry, and the publishing industry was going through a change. It was going from multi-million-dollar publishing systems to hundreds of thousands of dollars of publishing systems, and eventually what we call desktop publishing that we all do today, the Word type of product, right? We all take that for granted that we can make our own business cards, we can make our own stationery, we can make our own gift cards. In fact, even today, we don't print them anymore. They're all internet-based.
Hey, Alex, hold that thought because we're going to have to take a break, and we'll be right back.
You got it.
Listening to KHTS 1220 and 98.1 FM.
Come join me, Arif Halby, for Total Financial Solutions Safer Money Hour. Every Tuesday at noon, we uncover ways to help you manage your money, get out of debt, and prepare for your retirement. That's every Tuesday at noon on Total Financial Solutions Safer Money Hour. Are you not sure if you can retire yet? Listen to us and learn about tips for savings, retirement strategies, and so much more. That's every Tuesday at noon on Total Financial Solutions Safer Money Hour on your hometown station, KHTS.
Olive Terrace Bar and Grill is the hottest new Mediterranean fusion restaurant in Santa Clarita with unique delicacies like seafood right off the boat, mouth-watering prime steaks, artesian sandwiches, delicious pastas, and tasty kebabs. Unwind on their cozy outdoor patio at their weekend champagne brunch. Full menu and weekly specials at oliveterracebarandgrill.com. Check out their full bar and happy hour daily specials in Valencia on Copper Hill and Newhall Ranch Road by LA Fitness. Olive Terrace Bar and Grill, delicious food seasoned with love.
At City of Hope, we don't believe the future can wait for the future. For over a century, we've been advancing science that saves lives. From 4 of the world's top cancer-fighting drugs to the development of synthetic human insulin. We are maximizing the potential of immunotherapy and making precision medicine a reality. It's not enough to promise future cures for cancer. We must find them sooner. We are the miracle of science with soul. Find out more at cityofhope.org.
Buying your home can sometimes be challenging. That's why Charlene Gill with CSMC Mortgage is your Santa Clarita mortgage expert. What's important to you is to secure a loan at the best possible rate, to have a professional guide you through the process, and to close on time. Charlene's 23 years in the mortgage industry and her personal expert knowledge in the Santa Clarita Valley makes her your mortgage expert. Contact Charlene at hometownstation.com/Charlene. That's hometownstation.com/Charlene.
Dun-dun-dun. Ask Brien Radio, ASKBRIEN live on KHTS 1220 and 98.1 FM. And we have a fabulous, fabulous guest. And I'm not going to use the word fabulous anymore because it sounds too much. We have a very intellectual, successful business person on who actually has a lot of experience. In addition to his experience in his own businesses, he also has a lot of experience with an icon, Steve Jobs. So, Alex, we were discussing before we went on break about the mouse and about how that was a revolutionary change, and you were discussing that. Do you want to pick that up?
Sure. I think, Brian, one of the interesting things, you go back to why was the mouse invented and who invented it and how that happened. Well, there's a little bit of fog around some of that. I mean, the idea of a pointing device and having a pointing device had to do with a graphical user interface. So as I was saying, that if you didn't have a graphical user interface, if everything was on a command line, so to speak, there wasn't really a reason for a pointing device. But as far as I understand, the pointing device came from it was either the Army or the Navy. They had this concept that they were looking to be able to target things, and in aircraft and naval-based pieces, they used a pointing device to be able to target things. And of course, after the war, a lot of people got out, came up with these things. The concept of a pointing device was always there, and the idea of a graphical user interface came out. And of course, to get away from the command line, we take all that for granted now. So the mouse was the reason, an XY device to be able to work on a graphical user interface. How do we get to different parts of the screen? The reason I believe they called it the mouse is because it had the wire coming out that looked like a tail. And the original ones were round. They kind of looked like a rodent, so they called them a mouse. But yeah, it was an idea of what came first, the mouse or the graphical user interface. Well, the idea of a graphical user interface, what we call a GUI, came first, and then the mouse was the tool you used to do that. So would you have an effective graphical user interface without a mouse? Probably not. And then there were varying different types of mice called pucks. Pucks had multiple buttons on them and slid rather than rolled. So the technology of being able to get on the screen on a graphical user interface was there. What Apple saw from in Xerox Labs was the idea that graphical user interface could change the way people interfaced with computers. So while all of us say the mouse was really the turning point for Apple and the idea of Apple, it really wasn't the mouse. It was the idea that there's a graphical user interface, an XY coordinate on the screen, and we could use this very simple puck-like pointing device to get to it. So that was really the revolutionary piece. And how that all came about and how it was done was definitely trial and error. It was smart engineers saying, Steve saying, here's what I want to do, and go off and find out how to do it. And people like Bill Atkinson and many others there just came up with those concepts, and they're incredible, right? They're incredible.
Well, they are incredible. Now, but I'm thinking back even before that, okay? So it makes sense about the whole Army thing and the pointing device and the graphic interface. But Xerox, to my knowledge, at one time was the copy company, right? They made copies, and so
right.
How did an engineer or a product manager without any knowledge or even knowing about the Apple computer at that time, what drove them? If you may not know the answer. What do you think drove them to create that mouse for the graphic interface? For what? Did Xerox have a product that they were working on, and then they decided it didn't work, so they just put it on the side, and Steve Jobs came and grabbed it, or what do you think? Or no?
Well, no, I think I don't know exactly what drove them because, of course, all that was confidential at the time. But Xerox had a product way back in the 70s called the Alto, and it was a computer that actually used a mouse as a pointing device. Didn't have a graphical interface, so to speak, but it allowed you to work on the screen to do that. And then I believe the Xerox PARC was showed to Steve Jobs in 1981, and when he saw it, he just sold the idea. So, I can't use the word steal, right? But he acquired that idea and used it. But that really, Xerox was way more than a copier company. We consider them a copier company, but they really were revolutionary in developing these products. I mean, you have to remember one thing is that today, when we look at personal computers and computers in general, we have companies like Intel and AMD, and they make the CPUs, but they also design the circuit boards around them. We call them reference design motherboards, right? And so if I want to build my own computer, I go buy the parts and put them together and build a computer. Remember in the days when Xerox was doing this, they had to design the CPUs. They had to design the chips. It was much more of a real integrated design component system. So you had thousands of engineers working to make these things, and there weren't, the things we take for granted, Windows, Mac OS, Linux, these were operating systems. These operating systems didn't exist. They had to build all of that. So the hardware, the software, everything. So these ideas, they were just throwing a lot of ideas out. I mean, from what I understand about the Alto is, in the 70s, these things weren't successful at all. But, they resurrected it in the early 80s and built the PARC, and, that's the product that Apple was based on. So realistically, technology doesn't just happen overnight. We tend to think that. Things like the Internet make us believe that. But some of these technologies, I mean, think about the first idea of a pointing device came out in the 40s, if you think about it, World War II, right? And then it didn't commercially become available until the 70s, and then it really didn't take off until 84, until the Mac came out. You could say the Lisa right before that, but the Mac. So, if you look at that, that's almost 40 years for a technology that we consider, I mean, now you'd say trackpads are probably used more than mice, but that same concept is there. It took 40 years for that concept to take hold. So it wasn't like it was an overnight invention. And that's what a lot of people really don't understand. The Internet has been around for many, many years, right? It wasn't an overnight invention. It wasn't until, even though it was around for almost 30 years, it wasn't until the late 90s when we started seeing everyone have to have a website. And realistically, it wasn't, if you think about this, go back to the first time you really used email as a communication tool as a person, not for work, right? Because we had email for work in the 80s and the 90s, but for the most part, it wasn't until the mid-2000s before you really had that. So a lot of these technologies don't just take off. They take time, and part of that is the difference between an engineer coming up with a technology and a product person finding a practical application for it. Does that kind of make sense? Until we had web pages, the Internet didn't make sense. So we think of the Internet being web, but realistically the web is part of the Internet. The Internet is the base technology below it. until someone said, hey, you could have a web page that could be like a book. We didn't use it for 30 years. So that's the way these technologies actually get done.
We're listening to KHTS 1220 and 98.1 FM. I'm clearly an outlier, and I didn't think I was an outlier, but I was using AOL for personal use in 1994, and I had a website and a company called incorporationsetcetera.com for online incorporations in 1996 prior to Google's existence. So I guess I am an outlier. But there aren't too many of us, I guess.
No, and in fact,
go ahead.
Yeah, you picked that, and it's kind of interesting because Apple really started, for a lot of people, the personal computer piece of this. They started something they called eWorld, which I believe launched in 1996 as well. eWorld was like a city on the internet. It was the first web, and that caused most of us to build web pages. So most companies started in 96 building web pages because Apple started this with eWorld, and it was pretty incredible.
And I recall, because the web hosting company was charging me $90 a month, and I thought that was a good deal. Nowadays, forgetting about the cloud, you could probably get a web hosting site for $3 or $4 a month. So it was quite a drop in price after technology got bigger. Another piece of technology I want to go over was they had these MP3 players around in the 90s. In fact, my nephew, born in 86, 99, I asked him what he wanted for his birthday, and he said he wanted to get an MP3 player. And then I think we had the Zoom, and then all of a sudden, some guy came out with something called what? An iPod. So how did that happen?
Yep.
Do you have any background on that?
Yeah, that's really probably one of the most interesting stories of product and vision that has ever been. I mean, the iPod is an incredible story because most people think the iPod was this revolutionary device, and it wasn't. The idea that Apple would own music and Apple would own media, that was a revolutionary idea. So it started like this, Peter, to make it, Brien, to make it small for your audience, right? To make it easy for your audience. It started like this. Apple came up with a product technology. They actually came up with something called Rip, Mix, Burn. And the idea was that you would take your CD and you would put it into your computer and you would rip the songs off it, and then they would be on your computer, and then you could mix those songs around with a little piece of software that they came up with, which there were other pieces of software that would do this, but theirs was very slick. And then you could put in a CD and you could burn it. And so Apple was one of the first systems that actually had a CD player and burner built in the computer. And the reason that this was done was because this was the first step to get people to say, I have music and I have a computer, and my computer now becomes part of my music. And all it really was building what was very popular, and you probably remember this, Brien, you probably did this for a number of your people. You actually had mixtapes. Remember the old cassettes? You would mix them up, and you had a mixtape.
Of course, every time I broke up with a girlfriend.
Absolutely, right? I mean, I think of the movie Say Anything with where they had playing the big
boombox,
mixtape,
boombox,
right?
Yeah.
Big boombox, right? So the idea there was that you could do the same thing, but that was just a step because part of I was talking about how it took 30 years for the internet to figure out a web page and get everybody to use it. If you went to the 70s and you said we're going to have web pages, people wouldn't understand, but technology wasn't there. The same thing was true even with MP3 players. The problem is MP3 players kind of weren't out yet people were talking about it, but how did you get the music to them? So step one, and again, brilliant Apple strategy, step one, get people to associate a computer with your music. Now what you do is you do rip, mix, burn. You take a CD in, you put a CD out. The music is still living on your computer. It's a great way to do it. What's the next thing you do? Well, I'm going to eliminate the burn. Now I'm going to build this device called the iPod, and now I have a great way to get my music into the iPod. The way I get it in is I burn the CD, or I rip the CD. Now instead of burning it to another CD, I lay it out on my iPod. So now what you've done is you still have allowed the music companies to be able to sell you CDs, and you keep that CD because you're not allowed to get rid of it because legally you have to have if you have the music on your iPod, you have to own the CD. So now what you've done is you've associated 2/3 of the solution in the computer. 1/3 is the CD, 1/3 is the computer where you mix your songs, and 1/3 is the iPod where you play them. Kind of brilliant, right? What's the next thing you do? You go to all of the music vendors and you go, you know what? I want to eliminate the CD. I want to have a way where people can actually buy this from a store, download it directly to the computer, and put it out on the iPod, and we'll handle all the magic, and you'll make more money than you do selling a CD because you have to have big plants to press CDs. You have to, build the CDs themselves, do cover art, do all this stuff that you need to do, but we're going to put this in the computer. Now, by building the Apple Music Store, which is what most people don't get, the iPod, I don't want to say it this way, it wasn't successful until the Apple Music Store came out. Because once the Apple Music Store came out, you now locked people. And this is when all the copycats came. Remember buymusic.com? There were other companies that did this, but nobody could do it in such an elegant way that Apple did. There wasn't a lot of new invented technology there. As you said, there were many MP3 players. In fact, companies like SanDisk and, there were just so many. They built really, really good MP3 players. But what Apple had is they had the idea that end-to-end, your computer became the center. There was a term that they used called the media hub and the music hub. And Steve didn't use it very much, but he used this idea of the hub. The computer was the hub, and your iPod was one side of it, and the music store was the other. And now all of a sudden you had a way to easily find and buy music and put it out on your iPod. And that's when the sales of iPods just completely went through the roof. And others tried to copy it. There were music stores from many other companies, but how you got the music in the computer and how you got it to the MP3 player was clunky at best. In fact, even Microsoft had a product called the Zune. And they tried some really interesting marketing, which could be a whole other discussion. But the Zune failed extremely miserably. It had some cool features that didn't take off because, again, some engineers said, here's a really cool feature, and the market said, what the heck would I do with that feature? And some of the features the Zune had came in later as Apple started doling out these features and getting people used to them, where Microsoft just said, here's 10 features, go figure out what they are. We think they're cool. And so that came. And then, of course, from the iTunes Music Store came the iTunes, video store. And all of a sudden the ASP, or the average selling price, went from, 99 cents to all of a sudden now you got a $12 movie and a $20 movie, and now it's curated, and now you're doing suggestions, and it became a complete marketing play, which Apple is fantastic with. So over a course of a number of years, in Steve's head, he knew that the day he put out Rip, Mix, Burn, he was going to drive people to be owning music. I mean, if you remember, and I won't go into it because there were a bunch of legal pieces, but remember, Apple Music was owned by the Beatles. And, Apple had to buy that or be sued, right? I mean, there's a lot around that. But really, Apple wanted to own music. They wanted to own media. And it would be really hard for anybody pressed today to say that they don't own a big part of that, of the media distribution facility. They really do. And this didn't happen over one product. It's a concept that many of us in the product and engineering space call minimum viable product. And essentially what that is you start with a minimal viable product that people will buy, so you're not putting a ton of engineering up front and not getting paid for it, and then you see which way it's going to go. Now, the difference is most people don't know which way it's going to go. They haven't asked the questions. Someone brilliant like Steve Jobs knows where the end of the road is. He's already seen the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow before the rainbow starts. Most people have to follow that rainbow, and some find the pot of gold and many get lost. So I think that's really how engineering and marketing and sales come together.
You're listening to KHTS 1220 and 98.1 FM. We only have about 2 minutes before we're going to take a commercial break, so I don't know if you're going to finish. But my question is, why didn't the Apple TV become so popular? What's
why did
Why is it
not become popular?
It's not that popular. If you look at it, most people are not going to the Apple TV like they are to the iPhone or the iPod. They're going to it, but not in same significant numbers that they are to the other products.
Sure, I think you're. It's always this is always a question where it's an opinion, right? There's a lot of competition out there for the Apple TV, and it doesn't relate as closely to a computer as the other devices do. So if you look at an iPod, an iPhone, an iMac, a Mac Pro, even of course any of the iMac Pro and the MacBook, all of those products have a very close lineage. The TV sits in the room by itself, connected to the television, which isn't a product that Apple owns. And so I won't say they didn't make a lot of mistakes in the beginning with that, but it's a little off. So it's something a little different. They're having the same problem with the HomePod. It's just away from the center. So I will say that without talking bad about any of that stuff.
Well, again, we'll listen to KHTS 1220 AM and 98.1 FM. We're listening with Alex Grossman. We're going to be taking a very short break here, and we'll be back in about a minute or two.
Choosing the right copy service was a top priority for John Hayes, owner of Hayes Plumbing in Santa Clarita. John's glad he called Sean Milligan at Professional Copy Service.
Once we found Sean at Professional Copy Service, we've been very, very happy. We started using him right after our factory warranty had expired on the current copier that we had purchased, and Sean and his guys have been far and above better than the factory warranty service.
Professional Copy Service, 299-5756. 299-5756. The only authorized Canon dealer for sales and service in Santa Clarita for Santa Clarita Professional Copy Service.
We try to keep everything we can in this valley. We shop local ourselves, and we try to use any local merchant as possibly can.
Call Sean Milligan at Professional Copy Service, 299-5756.
Call Professional Copy Service immediately. They'll save you a lot of time and get your office staff back up to full production.
Professional Copy Service, Santa Clarita's only authorized Canon office equipment dealership. Ask about our free on-site demos.
When you're looking for a midnight snack, sometimes fast food just doesn't cut it. California Bakery and Cafe is open 24/7, so you'll be able to find fresh donuts, danishes, bagels, all-natural fruit juices, gourmet sandwiches, and much more at any hour. With elaborate cakes for any occasion, including weddings, baptisms, anniversaries, corporate events, or any special event. California Bakery and Cafe in Santa Clarita is open 24 hours to satisfy any craving, anytime. Call us, 255-1254. That's 255-1254.
Buying your home can sometimes be challenging. That's why Charlene Gill with CSMC Mortgage is your Santa Clarita mortgage expert. What's important to you is to secure a loan at the best possible rate, to have a professional guide you through the process, and to close on time. Charlene's 23 years in the mortgage industry and her personal expert knowledge in the Santa Clarita Valley makes her your mortgage expert. Contact Charlene at hometownstation.com/Charlene. That's hometownstation.com/Charlene.
Don and Gino here. So we know you want to have fun learning about real estate and finance. You're going to want to tune in this Saturday, 9 a.m. to the Don and Gino Real Estate and Finance Show right here on your hometown station. Hot topics, as always, guiding you to personal and financial wellness. And that's right, you don't want to miss it. So again, this Saturday, 9 a.m., and then we replay it online Sunday, 9 a.m., Tuesdays and Thursdays at 7 p.m. right here on the Don and Gino Real Estate and Finance Show. Join us.
It's the perfect Mother's Day gift that says it all. Classic Designs Jewelry. Discover the perfect gift that will not only put a smile on her face, it will last a lifetime. Classic Designs isn't like any other jeweler. They've been part of the Santa Clarita Valley since 1992. Apo and his team of experts will guide you through your choices, creating the best custom match for you and your budget. For the most distinctive jewelry experience, Classic Designs on Valencia in the Whole Foods Center. ClassicDesignsJewelry.com.
Welcome back, KHTS 1220 and 98.1 FM. Now, if that Rocky song doesn't get you enthusiastic, I don't know what will. But it certainly gets me going and should be getting everybody going. And also, the S. Brien Show should be getting you going on anything business-related, learning anything about business. We have a fabulous guest. His name is Alex Grossman. He has a lot of experience. He has a lot of experience with some icons in the world. Steve Jobs, one of them. And Alex, you there?
I am here, Brien. How are you?
So one of the questions I had, and I actually was asking this off the radio, is what is AI and how does that work?
AI. Well, AI stands for artificial intelligence, and the idea is really pretty simple. I mean, people can make a lot out of it, but it's the idea that a machine can emulate natural or instinctual thinking. So the idea that we as human beings, we have intelligence and we can sort things out in our head and we can think ahead. And the idea that machines only do what the instruction sets tell them and they can't think ahead. The artificial intelligence piece has really taken over every aspect of our world, and we don't see it getting any smaller. It's just going to grow. I mean, if someone asks me if you want to invest in things that are going into the future, AI is it. No matter what field that you're working in, AI will touch you. And I'll give you a couple of good examples of this when you talk about AI. I mean, well, the classic one that people are talking about today is they're saying, well, Facebook and all the data mining that's gone on and all the things that are happening, did they use artificial intelligence to target people and to do things? The answer is yes. And more important, that what a lot of people don't get, and this is, there's the thing called the Turing test for robots, and we won't get into that, but the idea, and you can Google that and look it up, Google, beautiful tool that uses a lot of AI. But the idea that there's two different concepts, one is called machine learning and the other is artificial intelligence. And it's really hard to tell the difference between the two of them, but we'll use them as the same idea to give you an example of where AI is getting so important in society. So for instance, a lot of times you have, people have, like I have an Amazon, I have an Alexa at home, right? People have Google Home. We use Siri in iPhones, tools like that. There's Cortina on Microsoft. And so those tools are AI and machine learning. So what they do is you will ask them a question, and what they will do is if the question isn't perfect, they'll reassemble it and try to think about what the question you're actually asking is to give you a contextual answer. And they do that using two types of technology. One is machine learning, meaning that they listen to you, and this is kind of the scary thing, right? They listen to you and they learn what you're asking, how you're asking it, how your grammar works, how your pronunciation works, and they learn from that, and they build a set of information about you, and they use that to try to give you the correct answer. The other thing they do is they use artificial intelligence. They say, if this is A and this is B, then I'm going to guess the next thing is C that you're going to ask. And so what seems amazing how sometimes they know that next song you want to listen to is. That's incredible how they pick that. A lot of I won't say which ones, but a lot of internet radio stations today use AI to determine what your playlist is going to be. In the old days, we had curated playlists. Human beings will look at it and they go, well, if this person likes this song, they'll like this song, or, machine learning. 90 people who listen to this song out of 100 listen to this song next, so therefore I'm going to play that next song. AI comes in and says, well, if this song has this beat and that beat in this particular voice, then this next song is going to be liked because it has these similar functions. So in our world today, AI is happening everywhere we can do. It's in our cars, it's in our homes, it's in our work, and this is the next big thing. Artificial intelligence is kind of scary in a lot of ways.
Yes, I did see Terminator.
I was just going to say Terminator's a great example of that, but it's also really exciting because what it allows us to do is to not think about some of those functions that we would normally have to do, frees us up to do other things, and allows us to actually be able to have things done for us in a way that are a lot easier, right? There's so many examples of
so
where
it's a time management tool?
It is a time management tool, and it's really, we have this concept that everything that we do, the risk is that everything that we do today we're going to lose because AI does it for us, right? For instance, the easy example of AI that I think of is, the new smart alarm clocks. So what they do is they know you get up late every day, so they reset the time for you so that, it wakes you up 5 minutes early because you can't do that yourself. You don't want to set your clock 5 minutes ahead. So what it does is it wakes you up 5 minutes early. It lies to you, and then you get up and you make it to work on time. Is that kind of scary?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's a little scary, but it's cool. The autonomous vehicles. I mean, we're all talking about, self-driving cars. Yeah, occasionally an Uber runs someone over. It's a horrible, horrible thing. But in the real world, autonomous vehicles are getting closer to reality, and there's a ton of AI and machine learning involved. I get scared when I think about autonomous weapons, which will be the next, we've seen all the sci-fi shows of that's the way things will be done. So there's just a lot of that. The other one that comes in with AI that scares me is when you take security, such as physical security, meaning drones and cameras, and now AI goes into the Minority Report type of situation where it says, well, if you're seen doing this and this, here's what you're going to do next. And so there's a little bit of danger in some of that, but there's also a lot of good from just the idea that, hey, I don't have to think about what my next playlist is going to be on the radio. I don't have to remember to get up 5 minutes early. Those are just the simple things. I don't have to learn how to park my car anymore because it parks itself.
Well, then you won't need a driver's license.
Probably not.
Except to get in a bar.
Go ahead.
Except to get in a bar.
Yeah.
We have to wrap this up. You're a great guest. We'll have you back again, Alex. And you listen to KHTS 1220 and 98.1 FM. Thank you very much, Alex. And your company is GoSimply.com, GOSYMPLY.com.
Thanks.